Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to an episode of Victorious Friday. As I always promise, I have amazing guests, and today is no exception. Not only do I have a guest, but I have a good friend. And
Yes, sir.
Tom
Yes,
Lutz, we've
sir.
been knowing each other for many, many years. And he has written an amazing book that's coming out. We're going to talk about that. But let me start us this way. When we look at equipping Christians for kingdom purpose in their work, you know, in God's kingdom, it's never enough just to have a spiritual insight or a pure heart. It's going to require faithfulness.
Yeah,
And
no
it's
doubt.
always revealed in action.
Yep.
Well, today, think about
How
this.
true, how true.
40% of Christians are engaged in any kind of discipleship. 40% of Christians are not engaged.
Yeah.
But what does it mean for where we live, work, and play? I mean, what if 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%, 100% of Christians are engaged in discipleship? And we'll talk of specifically what that means. Would it make a difference? Tom Lutz, welcome to the show, my friend.
Terrence, it's good to be with you. Love what you guys do at Victorious Family.
Man, I tell you, we are humbled that we get an opportunity to speak with parents around the world, and a lot of those parents, as you know, are business leaders, and so just amazing. And they're dealing with pain issues around business. Well, let me tell you a little bit about Tom. I think he'll be embarrassed by this, but if I didn't, you know, it wouldn't do the audience any justice. Tom, he started Vision Planners LLC. It was a strategic planning consultancy designed to assist leaders in creating plans to advance their visions. I mean, this guy, he has an amazing story, and just the people that he still walk with today in the business world is phenomenal. As a result of this unique background that Tom has, he served hundreds of churches, nonprofits, and businesses in developing plans designed to ensure that they accomplish their leader's vision. And man, just think about if we have a target and we have a vision, we know where we're going, a horizon, and strategically aim to get there, the impact that could have. Well, in 2010, Tom began work at as a convene chair, and currently chairs 2 thriving groups in the greater Atlanta area. And man, I'm excited to visit those groups soon.
That's right. We got a plan for you to come address them and talk to them about the Victorious Family. That's exciting.
Now, I'm excited too, because Tom has his first book out, and he's given us the honor to come on this show and talk about it. And it's called Equipping Christians for Kingdom Purpose in Their Work.
It is.
And it's a guide, isn't it, Tom? It's a guide for all who make disciples. And it was published this year, and it's available. We're going to talk about how to get the book. We're going to talk about the book a little bit. But before, we're going to get to know Tom a little bit better, and just let you know, he won't brag about it, but he is a CrossFit trainer. I mean, he CrossFit trains. He does all this stuff. He makes people like me look bad. By being
no, I don't. You look great.
His greatest claim to fame has been married for 47 years to Sherry. I don't know how she's put up with him, but she continues to put up with him. Actually, it's just a beautiful, close relationship. And they're in proximity to their 7 children and 14 grandchildren. Make sure I got the numbers right, because I know people be adding things. 14 grandchildren. Tom, it's amazing to have you and ready to dive deep. Before we dive deep, here's where I want to start. Tell me about the early years of your life. Tell me, what was it like growing up? Where did you grow up? What was it like? What was the spiritual side of your life? Just give us a summary view of how it all started.
Right. Yeah, this is, I'll give thanks to God and praise to the parents that raised me. I was the youngest of 5 by about 11 years. So I kind of was the youngest child plus an only child. I had, both the advantages of that rearing. But I tell my friends, I was raised in a surprisingly functional family. You don't hear that story a lot. There's always the dysfunction that came about. Mom was Catholic, dad was Methodist, raised us reading the Bible, prayer. I had 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters. Just dad raised us Catholic all the way through the Catholic schools as a promise. When you marry a Catholic, you promise to do that. He was very faithful to do so. And maybe part of it is, by the time I came along as the youngest of 5, 11 years after the 4th, I think my parents were pretty relaxed. They had plenty of money. Everything was going good. So stress, I was probably the biggest stress they had. But yeah, no, people don't understand how much of a blessing that is. My wife will tell you the same story about her family, which has gave us a great leg up in terms of, don't want to say, I let my children say this, but I think we had a surprisingly functional family as well, because of the blessing my parents passed down to us, which all the more makes what you do at Victoria's Family so important. So important.
Oh, man, that's fantastic. And what part of the country did you grow up in?
Grew up in Baltimore, Maryland.
Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah,
Man, I tell you.
Suburbs of Baltimore, a little bit north, right on the city-county line.
Yeah, yeah. Now, how did you get involved in this CrossFitting, man? How did all that come about?
Well, that came about 10 years ago. I have with my children, I'm an entrepreneur. They grew up watching an entrepreneur, and I all told them, we don't plan to leave a whole lot of money for them, but if they have a business they want to start, we're all in. So I've had opportunity to start some sort of business with all of my children except one. And one of my children wanted to start a CrossFit gym. I was a runner all my life. I was very active, lifted weights and so forth. But then he got me into CrossFit about 10 years ago. I have a daughter who's also a CrossFit trainer. And of course, at my age, you don't do CrossFit like the young bucks. You do what we call the scaled version. So the weights are a little bit lighter. I don't climb up ropes, and I'm sorry, I want my feet firmly on the ground. So they make accommodations for the scaled participants among us.
Awesome.
But actually, I just came back. Fortunately, I showered, but I just finished at the gym at noon today. So
man, well, you're looking great, man. Whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. Well, hey, let me ask you a question. I mean, you've been in the marketplace and having impact in the marketplace for years. When you look at your experiences, is there anyone in particular in the marketplace that might have had a great impact on your life, or would you say walk with you and disciple you along the way?
Yeah, so I had the very good fortune. So quick story of how I got into the business. I went through Masters of Divinity, was ordained as a teaching elder in the PCA back in 1980, a few years ago. But never had a real clear sense that God was calling me into a pastoral role. But we thought if we're going to do it, we'd make it an adventure. So we actually started the church, my wife and I, in the inner city of Baltimore.
Okay.
And so we moved in. The church could not afford to pay me a lot. And I had a couple of Christian brothers who were starting a business. And I kind of thought, wow, what's that? Right. And they said, hey, we need some workers. You seem to have some skills. Why don't you come work for us? We'll pay you. We'll give you the flexibility to do the church work. And after a very short time in that role, I tell my pastor friends, after several years as a pastor, God called me to the ministry, and that ministry is in the workplace. But our senior leader, so we had, when we started the company, it was about 9 partners. I had the good fortune after a while to buy in. And Errol Wolford, I mentioned him in the book in the dedication acknowledgments. Even as a young man, I just was amazed at the way he was just a different leader. And I knew it was because of his relationship to Jesus. And just watching that really taught me to bring my faith into the way I led in the workplace. So Errol was and there are a lot of other individuals, that were very influential. But as far as in the workplace, I told him, I had lunch with him, gave him a book right after it came out. And I told him, he was one of my earliest examples of what it means to be equipped for kingdom purpose in the workplace.
And I tell you, it really makes a difference. I remember in my early years and starting, coming out of school and working with Johnson & Johnson. At that time, we had a CEO by the name of Dr. James Burke. And as you know, for some that might remember, in 1982, one of the most tragic consumer product events happened in our country.
I do remember.
Tainted Tylenol capsules. And 7 people lost their lives due to that. But the reason we have safety seal packaging today is because of that incident. But I just remember Dr. James Burke when we were having a strategic session around this. I'm 21 years old. I'm 3 months out of college. I'm a week before I was supposed to go to training, in Dallas, Texas. Actually, I remember it well in September of 1982. He says, so we're talking about the recovery plan and where do we go next? And one person mentioned, Dr. James Burke, this is going to cost us about $150 million. How do we do this and how do we do that? How do we save on this? And Dr. James Burke just stopped him right there. He says, listen, there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. He says, I don't want to hear another question about dollars again. He says, we're going to do whatever it takes to serve our consumers, even if it means we never ship another bottle of Tylenol again. Well, you know the story. In 3 months, we not only retool, rebuild, remanufacture, reposition, but Tylenol was back on the shelf, exceeding where it was. And it's a case study now people study. So the impact that Dr. James Burke had on my life is very similar to the story that you're saying. And it made a whole difference in how I conduct business the rest of my life.
In the marketplace. When you see that, well, it's like you say, it's never a wrong time to do the right thing. And I think that was one of the things I learned from Harold.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump in because you have I'm reading the book now. I'm getting through. I'm about halfway done. I'm taking notes. I've got it highlighted and all that good stuff. And I'm going to advise people to get the book in a minute, but let's set it up and let's talk about what inspired you to write the book, first of all.
Yeah.
And then just kind of set it up for us a little bit. And then I'll dive into some questions and see, can we pick your brain and get all that wisdom out of there?
Right. Yeah. So I'll tell you a story that is told in the book. I've been from early, so I came out with my master's of divinity and then was in the workplace. And so I was a bivocational pastor. So I tell people I'm bilingual. I speak pastor and I speak business guy. And that's a little bit unusual. There's not a whole lot of us around. And over the years, as I was developing my sermons, developing my discipleship literature for a new church, my Sunday school classes or whatever I might be, any presentations I did them all in the workplace. I'm sitting at my desk, I'm interacting with a salesperson or interacting with a vendor, customer, partner, whatever it might be. And so naturally, I just automatically applied. When I illustrated from my sermons and applied my sermons, it was to what was happening around my world. And I didn't think that was all that unusual. Until years later, I began to realize I speak differently about theology than the average pastor. And I think it's because my early days of learning to communicate was in the workplace. And so for years, I was a speaker on, different faith and work platforms and would attend faith and work conferences. And this is what and it says what prompted me to write the book. I was at a conference at RTS, Reformed Theological Seminary here in Atlanta, and it was on faith and work. And I looked around the room and I realized, I have been in the same kinds of conferences with this more or less the same group of people for 20 years. Yeah. And and all patting ourselves on the back, how clever we are to understand this unique aspect of theology. And as I was looking around, I heard the Lord say to me in a not audible, but an inaudible voice, until every Sunday from every pulpit, every sermon is illustrated from and applied to the workplace, they're not going to believe it. And what I realized is our movement had to get outside of talking to itself and had to equip the people who are discipling the next generation of believers. And so that kind of put me on a trail. I decided, well, I want to make sure the way I think is correct. So I went back and earned my doctorate. The title of my dissertation is Equipping Christian, I'm sorry, that's the name of the book. The title of the dissertation is Discipling C-Level Christian Executives. And it was a qualitative research on some of the people that I had discipled over the years to try to figure out what was it about the way I discipled that had really big impact in terms of spiritual growth in people's lives. Anyway, wrote that. When you do a dissertation, you have to, or they ask you to do a literature review on the other dissertations and the other books and writings in your field. So my field is books by pastors about discipling people that work outside the church. Surprisingly enough, I spent a weekend with the librarian at Covenant Seminary trying to find that literature. And it dawned on me that there just simply isn't any. You know, there's lots of books on discipleship. There's lots of really good books on faith and work. There's no books that bring that together. So I said, Lord, that's obviously what you were talking to me about at Reformed Seminary. So my co-writer Heidi and I set about kind of taking the way I discipled people and then turned that around into a book that's a how-to or a model to give to somebody. So, no better disciplers than parents. So they were a target audience. No better disciplers than a business owner, men's discipleship leader, campus ministers, convene chairs. We kind of said anyone who disciples someone whose primary work is outside the church. It was a target for that. Okay. The reason we did that is, and there's a premise of the book, is that the reason we're having trouble in our society today and why only 40% of the people that you mentioned care to be discipled is we've been taught as a discipler to disciple people for what they do at church. Okay. And so that's one of the key themes of the book. And what I'm trying to turn around is we need to disciple people as image bearers. People created, put in the garden to work it. And that changes everything in terms of once people realize that God's call applies to all their waking hours, not just nights and weekends, then they come banging on the door of the church to be discipled because they realize God cares about what they're doing outside of the church.
And I love that. I want to go deeper into that, Tom, because that's powerful what you just said. Because, people use this word discipleship, and, it's not even in the Bible, discipleship, but of course it points to discipleship in so many ways. Talk to us deep around vocational discipleship. What is it? What does it mean? What does it look like? And what are some practical applications that we can put into the workplace, into the marketplace?
Right. I'm preparing a talk for at my church, the I don't know what they call them, but the 20-somethings. And they're doing a summer of zeal around.
Talking to my group.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure. I figured you'd be there. So even my target audience, as I was thinking of soon. But they're, so they're just starting in the workplace. And their theme this summer is zeal for church, zeal for work. And so I got thinking about that. That's just not something we normally talk about, not something they've been trained to think about, that they really ought to put their heart and soul into it. So for me, vocational discipleship is all about that. It's for training them, not for what I'm called to do, but training them for their vocation. And so it goes back to this idea of the image bearer. God put Adam and Eve in the garden on the 6th day. 5 days he created something and he pronounced it good. Good, 5 times good. On the 6th day, he puts the image bearer in there, and catch this is significant. The God of the universe identifies the fact that somehow what he had done the first 5 days had been improved upon on the 6th day. Is that a powerful thought?
Oh, that's powerful.
When he put the image bearers in the garden, he himself pronounces this is now a better place, a better place. And he gave them 3 instructions. said, this place is empty. I want you to create abundance. We often use the word fill, but that kind of sounds like having sex and children. It's part of it, but it's not limited to that. It's create abundance. Take the seed that's in the ground, multiply it 100-fold, thresh it, bake it, blend it, wrap it, put it on the shelves at Kroger, so that there's an abundance of bread in your community. That's number one. Number two is this place has infinite potential. Think about that. Infinite potential placed in it by an infinite God. I want you to cultivate that. Wow. I want you to, I've put it there, but specifically God says, my job is to hold it all together. Your job is to extract that potential, to cultivate that potential. And into eternity on this, the new heaven and the new earth here physically in this world, pick a number, the biggest number you can think of, Terrence.
Oh man, I can't even think that big. Multi-trillions.
1 billion trillion years from now, the potential that God has placed in this earth will not have been all fully realized.
That's it. Yeah.
Right? So that's a big job. And then number three, this always raises eyebrows. This place is incomplete and dangerous. I need you to subdue it. I need you to wrestle the power of wind, the power of water, the power of sun, ice, fire, electricity, and all to create a flourishing environment. Now, of course, the fall intervened. That's a problem. Redemption needed to be brought. But the purpose of redemption, we weren't created to be redeemed, right? We were created to be image bearers who, and this is, Tim Keller makes this point in what his book on faith and work. Christianity is the only religion in which work is part of paradise, right? We worked in the original paradise. We will work in the new heaven and the new earth, and we'll work everywhere in between. And so when we talk about vocational discipleship, it's I go through three major sections, 5 sections in the book with 3 questions. Question number 1 is, who are you? So I'm discipling you. I got to ask you, who are you? And the answer to that in simple terms is you're an image bearer created by God to do some sort of kingdom purposed work. And so when people grasp that sense that, well, I'm a trash collector. Does God care about that? I'm an engineer. I'm a stay-at-home dad or mom. Is that really something? Is that a calling from God? Second question is, what is your kingdom purpose? And that's where we ask this question: what would happen if nobody did what you do? And again, you start thinking about, like, especially in COVID and the pandemic, we began to realize all those irrelevant people that we don't pay any attention to, who pump your gas or deliver stuff to your front yard or pick up your trash, et cetera, et cetera. All of a sudden, we began to realize those people are really important. I was given a workshop one time, and I asked that question. There was a CEO whose company collected trash. They were a trash collection company, and he just got to laughing, and he said, if we didn't collect, and if nobody collected the trash, we'd all be dead. Yeah, bubonic plague. Yeah. And so then all of a sudden, when people begin to realize that God cares, what the Billy Graham organization does is really important. But if everybody's dead, there's nobody to preach to, right? So the trash collector and the Billy Graham organization, in God's eyes, are 2 parts of a beautiful mosaic, all doing the work. And that's what the church, in Revelation 20, the angel takes John by the hand and says, come here, let me show you the bride, which of course is code for the church. And he points them to the New Jerusalem. That's the church. The vibrant, working, functioning, flourishing city is God's vision for what the church is supposed to be.
Tom, that's so good. I was just listening to you, and it reminds me of one thing. I take you back years. My father used to share with me. He says, he really believed that, Terrence, everyone has intrinsic value.
Yeah, I was taught that by my dad as well.
He says, hey, there's the president up here, and and there's the janitor. He says the janitor is just as important as the president. He said, if you don't believe that, hey, just don't change the toilet paper in that restroom a few days.
And see what the president says.
See what the president says, right?
Precisely.
So
He'll notice.
Yeah,
he'll notice. He'll notice. I told a story on another podcast not too long ago. I don't think it's in the book, but it's a good story. John Kennedy, of course, famously challenged the country to get to the moon back when I was a very young man. And so that for 10 years, that was the vision and he was recorded at Cape Canaveral, which is what it was called before Cape Kennedy, of course, going around talking to people and just asked, what do you do here? What do you do here, sir? What do you do here? And he came to a janitor, someone who cleaned the toilets, fixed the broken things, and said, and sir, what do you do here? And this janitor said, I help put a man on the moon.
That's it.
Right? So whoever was running in that organization made sure everybody understood. Another question I often ask is, do you fly a plane by any chance?
I don't fly. I fly on a plane, but I don't fly a plane.
Well, I talk to airline pilots. I love to ask this question. Which part of the engine would you like to take off without?
They'll
go, I said, come on, give me a screw and a bolt.
Yeah.
Let me take something out.
No.
I'm not going anywhere if all the parts.
I want extra bolts and screws in there.
That's right. But that's the way we got to look at it. Everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody has a call from God,
right.
And they aren't, unfortunately, in our society. We don't appreciate what we're talking about here. Like I say, in COVID, I think we did. We began to realize how important truck drivers are, how important all the people that we kind of take for granted are. And just, my dad taught me to, if I'm walking through my church at night and there's somebody cleaning up, I stop and I thank them because the church is always so crystal clear and clean. And every time you do that, big smiles. Yeah. Because they're if someone is it, they're realizing they're important to someone.
Yeah, we all want to be affirmed, Which you mentioned something, a lot of times, even as Christians, we like to take that hat on Monday, Sunday and take it off on Monday. And we do this stuff and we segment and decompartmentalize our life.
We do.
And you and I know that's not the way we were designed to operate. We're to live, where we live, work, and play, all aspects of life. We are who we are. And you're suggesting, I believe, also that the workplace is, should not be off limits, right? To our faith.
Absolutely.
And I like,
and of course, there's a lot of pressure in our society
Sure.
that's telling us, keep that faith separate, at bay, keep it out there.
Give me your thoughts on those and the obstacles and so forth that exist, and how do we, what's your thoughts around it?
Yeah. So my experience is kind of interesting along that line. I think, again, one of the reasons for the book is I don't know that the people we disciple or the members of our churches know how to be a Christian at work, right? They know how to behave, don't have an affair, don't steal from the boss, don't cheat on your taxes. But they don't really know how to be an architect with kingdom purpose, or a HVAC mechanic with kingdom purpose, or a plumber or whatever with kingdom purpose, because we haven't taught them that, right? We haven't taught them the concepts we've been talking about that you're an image bearer and the work that you do is important. We've also unintentionally given the impression that what happens outside of church is really not important. Because when you go to church, you sit there, you're going to sit in the if you're a good active church member, you're going to sit in church 2,500 hours in your lifetime. You're going to be 90,000 hours sitting behind your desk at work or driving your truck or whatever it might be. But so little mention is made of the workplace in the typical sermon that people just think, I don't know, does God care about I'm just going out there. Dick Doster, my friend who is editor of By Faith magazine years ago, set out to ask 100 people, why do you work? And he said 100 out of 100 said, it, amongst other things, to bring money back to church. Now, that's a good thing. Church needs money, but that's not the total purpose. No. It's to bring glory to God. And so then what's the net result is, our people really aren't very much different than their coworkers, right? And then all of a sudden we teach them these little glitzy, techniquey ways to share the gospel, which from my perspective are not very authentic, right? They sound contrived, right? And so here you are, a guy that I don't have huge respect for because of, I don't see you as being anything special in the workplace. You're now kind of putting this shtick on me about what am I going to do when I go to heaven? And it sounds awkward. It sounds contrived. In the book, what we say, the best method of evangelism is to make Jesus attractive.
That's good.
What does that mean? That means make your family so remarkable that people knock on your door and say, tell me how you do this.
Yeah.
Right. Be such an excellent example of a hardworking, disciplined salesperson that people say, tell me what makes you tick. I had a story. So CMD, the company that I helped to start, and we actually grew to 1,800 employees in 18 countries when we sold it. And we were a construction information company. And we had the opportunity we were about $150 million, $150 million company. We had the ability or the opportunity to go and to benchmark. You've probably heard that term in the marketplace, where you find a non-competitive similar company, and you just find how many of these does it take to do these in your organization, and how much are you paying for this, and et cetera. And so we did that with Bertelsmann in Germany, and the CEO, whose name you would know, famous European high social family, at the end of the week came up and said to me, because we didn't share the gospel per se with him, but he came out to me at the end of the week and he said, what is it with you people? I said, what do you mean, what is it with us? He said, it's like, he said it's like you love each other or something. I said, well, I'd be glad to tell you what makes us tick, and got to share the gospel. I got to share the gospel with him. Errol, my senior partner, was much closer in relationship with him. He's now a believer today, running a bunch of business Southeast Asia. But why is that the best way to evangelize? Is they're coming to me, they're coming to you, and they're already attracted, right? If somebody comes up to you and says, man, I love your bike. Where'd you get your bike? Well, I tell them I got it down at, Joe's bike shed. And then they run down to Joe's bike shed and they buy one. Why? Because they were attracted to it. And I think if more Christians would stop the gimmicks and just be attractive for Jesus, that's what Peter says, right? Be prepared to give an answer for those who ask for the hope that's in you.
Yeah, and what hope we have, right?
And that's why when I talk about vocational discipleship, that's what it means to teach our people to be disciples in their work.
I love it. Yeah.
Do it well as to the Lord.
Yeah. Tom, when I think of some of those principles, marketplace leadership, and I'd love for you to speak on this topic a little bit more as well. Things like prayers of lifeblood of these type of leaders, character, integrity is a lifeblood. I mean, if you think about some of these characteristics, whether you're a Christian or not, I mean, as a business leader, you want them to be present in your marketplace: integrity, honesty, et cetera, right? What makes, as you think about it, that attractiveness, right? What would you say are some principles or maybe even a story that you can tell that kind of demonstrates that we're not necessarily better, although we strive to be, but we should be different, shouldn't we? They should see something different in us.
Right. I can't remember. As one of the executives at Chick-fil-A, and you may know the book, but he came and spoke at an event I was at. And I think it's something about remarkable. Is that the name of the
Remarkable,
book?
yes.
Am I right? Am I remembering that?
Remarkable with an exclamation point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I think Chick-fil-A is an example, right? As much as people like to revile them for their Christian position, they always come up as the most admired the most admired company in America, or among the top.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because the chicken sandwich is excellent every time. You get through the drive-in in remarkable time. The order's always right. When you walk in there, they say, "It's my pleasure," just like the Ritz, right? That came from Chewett Cathy, grilling that into people. Their philosophy is, if we treat Judy well, she'll treat the customer well. And I think that's remarkable.
Yeah.
And so whether you like their position on some political statement, you're attracted. You'd rather go to Chick-fil-A than Sloppy Joe's, because the experience is just better, and it shines well on Jesus.
I love it. Well, Tom, I think we can go on again. I'm talking with Thomas Lutz. I call him Tom.
Yes, sir.
He has written a tremendous book. I want you to go out. And the title of that book, again, Tom, give that to us.
Here it is: Equipping Christians for Kingdom Purpose in Their Work, a guide for all who disciple.
And tell us where we can get it. I mean, I know it's on all the Amazon and all of that.
Yeah,
is there a URL or anything specifically?
Yeah, pretty much anywhere you buy your books. It's published by Hendrickson, which is a division of Tyndale. Okay. So any place that buys books that Tyndale rep calls on, they can order it.
It's available.
It's at my church bookstore. I know up at in Johns Creek here. Amazon for sure. ChristianBooks.com, BarnesandNoble.com, HendricksonRose.com, which is the publisher's house. And also, if people want to follow what we're doing, there's additional kind of some of the podcasts get posted on stuff. If you go to Facebook/vocational discipleship, that'll pull up the page on the book, and it'll give you some other resources. We're hoping to do. I was just talking to someone the other day about putting together a discipleship curriculum based on the book. So that may be something we'll do.
That would be wonderful, man. I need it. And I always advise, don't buy one book. I mean, one book is for you, right? That's no problem.
But buy 10 books away.
Right. Buy 10 books, so you can give 9. I say give 9 away to Tom. I up the game here, man. This is remember the Bountiful Unlimited and all that stuff.
A lot of the Christian, so Convene is a national organization, about 600 companies, 600 CEOs and members, somewhere along that line. And a lot of them have actually bought a book for themselves, and then bought books for their leader team and have studied it together, because it really is applicable. It helps them talk to the people that report to them, and get a sense. Lencioni says one of the things you need to do for employee engagement is help your people know who they're important to. Right. And that's where we talk about their kingdom purpose. Good. When they realize that it's important to you that they clean up the bathrooms, they feel appreciated and affirmed. That's right.
This last piece, I want to now connect it to Victoria's family, because these same principles apply at home, doesn't it, Tom?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Give us one of those principles and why they're so important.
Yeah, well, I think to some degree there's no more important discipleship relationship than dad to child, mom to child. And here's this back end story, but I'll come back to it. I worked with some of the campus ministry organizations, particularly campus outreach out of the PCA. And one of the problems they had was they were doing discipleship of college students, but the brass ring to them was, in the future, the college student gets to be a campus outreach minister. Right. That was, then they'll admit it, that was the pinnacle. Now they're discipling them to be the best architect, engineer, doctor, whatever it might be. And so we, again, part of the way we raised my kids came to work with me at 10 years old. I mean, just, it was kind of like, come spend a day with dad once a week when they were out of school. And I'd get them doing this and that and the other thing. We'd go to lunch, a business lunch. And, but the idea was we tried to train them not to be good soccer, although playing soccer is important. I love soccer. But we tried to, and from a very early age, to let them understand that their future is to serve someone in the marketplace. And I think right now my kids are all in a role where they're delivering really valuable service.
That's good.
That's what parents have to have the mindset that they're discipling image bearers as well, who are called to. So teach them to work. I had my son's got two kids that are I guess they're 12 and 8, and they were out weeding. And he sent me a picture of it. He said, we used to have Weeding Wednesday in our house, and my kids hated it. But then my youngest son just bought a house down the street from us a couple of months ago, and he was out weeding. He said, hey, Dad, thanks for teaching me to weed.
I love
so
it.
I don't know. I think that's my advice to the parents among us is understand these creatures are image bearers called by God to do some purposeful work. Help them find it, help them excel at it.
I love that. I can almost stop there, Tom. Because we can go another 3 hours between us, man.
I can talk. I'm not passionate.
I love it. Hey, here's what I like to do.
Okay.
In 60 seconds or less, I like for you to look into that camera. And I like for you to think about those listeners that will be connecting and those viewers, YouTube, etc., and just give them a word of encouragement. Encourage them today. Encourage them around this topic. And in any way you want to do it, I'm going to just give you the minute to do take it wherever you want to go. But just encourage our folks today. So here's maybe even a challenge and an encouragement. If you are a discipler, that could be a parent, it could be a boss who's mentoring people in the workplace, someone leading a discipleship group, senior pastor of 30-somethings, campus minister, convene chair, head of a nonprofit, whatever. If you have a role where you're training people who work outside the church and you want to see spectacular spiritual growth, buy the book and put these principles into place. I have seen men that I've discipled. One was a lawyer. When he came into my discipleship group, he said, I honestly think when I go into church, I'm going to work on Monday morning, that God is looking down at me, holding his nose and saying, what are you doing there? A lot of those people that we're working with, that's how they feel about work. After he was discipled and understood, he was a lawyer and he did a lot of divorce work, but he always defended the hurt party. After he started thinking image bearer wise, he came to me one morning with tears in his eyes. And he said, God gave me a word this weekend. That word is protector. My kingdom purpose is to protect people. And then he said, and I quote him in the book, he said, at that point, spirituality went from, what I did at church, it invaded all of my life. If that's the desire you have for the people you desire, it's proven. Buy the book, put it into practice, and you'll get that same experience with the people you disciple. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for that words of wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen. Great to be here. Thanks, Terrence. Yes, sir. Listen in on our podcast and Do Your Children Believe, as well as go to our website, victoriousfamily.org. We'll have great resources like this one. Share this with your friends. Click like and share. We appreciate it. Tom, thank you so much for your time, brother. And bless you, brother. Thank you for sharing just amazing wisdom. It's good to be here. Same here.